Welcome, everybody, to the NFL Show on the Grizzly Truth Sports Network. I am your host for the NFL Show, Mike Goodpaster, and let me welcome in my co-host. First up, NFL beat reporter Sam Teets. How you doing, Sam?
I'm doing great, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
All right, and of course, as always, from the FF Face-Off, Anthony Cervino.
What's going on, guys?
And, of course, we do have on our panel today, between the four of us, we've won 3 Super Bowl rings. And unfortunately for me, Anthony and Sam, they're all owned by one guy. Help me welcome to the show, 3-time Super Bowl champion, Randy Cross. How you doing, Randy?
I'm doing fantastic. It's Friday of Super Bowl week, and this thing's almost here.
Yeah, you still could have gave one of those Super Bowl rings to the Bengals. But let's go ahead. And the thing that stands out to me is the game this reminds me the most of, and Matt Andruscavage, who covers the 49ers for us, brought it up to me the other day, Randy. It's Super Bowl 19, where everybody waited for the Miami Dolphins to watch their offense, and an entirely different offense stole the show.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, NFL films behind our bench towards the end of that game caught me cracking about that. And it made the highlight film for the game and a bunch of other stuff. But that's really happens to be the case, I think, in several Super Bowls when you look at it. But usually when you start ignoring defense, especially nowadays when you're just so obsessed with offensive numbers and everything else, I think sometimes that kind of comes back and slaps people in the head. And that's what happened in Super Bowl 19. They kind of forgot about some of these Hall of Fame type guys that we had on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, we had a good offense, mind you, but all we heard all week long was about Dan Marino and how you possibly going to stop Miami. And, once that first quarter was over, it really wasn't close.
Yeah, it was close for a quarter, and then that was it. And the big thing there was, it's similar to this, the Dolphins really didn't have much of a running game.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that can be a problem in these kind of games because there's 2 things that are hard to come by. And one is kind of consistent, and that's poise, and the other one's patience. And when things go a little bit sideways, it's hard to keep that patience. And when you don't have the ball and you are a really good offense, patience is almost impossible to come by. So, yeah, I think it's something most coaches try to remind themselves. And if I was a coach in this type situation, I'd almost have somebody whose only assignment was to remind me about poise and patience, because it's hard to have and easy to lose.
Yeah, and I mean, Anthony Cervino knows that because he's a Cowboys fan, and they're always losing their poise. So, Anthony, when you look at this game, what do you think is the key that people are missing? Because I know that at least most of the last 2 weeks I've taken that you kind of like Kansas City in this game.
Yeah, I do like the Chiefs here, but you can't overlook just, how good that 49ers defense is. The team with the better defense has won 6 out of the past 7 Super Bowls, with the outlier being the Patriots' victory over Seattle, and that was done on the last play. That San Francisco pass rush, I think they're going to have to get to Mahomes to slow that offense down. The Chiefs have given up the 3rd fewest sacks per game at 1.6 rate, but they have yet to face a pass rush as deep and as talented as San Francisco. So I think that's going to be the key, is if that pass rush can be contained.
Yeah, and the thing I like here, Randy, is when you look at the 49ers defense to rush the passer, they've got Bosa, Ford on the edges who can get there. But the thing I like about them with defending Kansas City is they don't have your typical defensive tackles. I mean, their defensive tackles, Buckner, I mean, these guys are guys that are big, tall, physical, but they're very athletic.
Oh, yeah, they really are. And it's kind of scary when you look at that many number 1 picks in one position group in a game can be a tad intimidating. But then again, you've got to be really bad for a good stretch of time to have that many number one picks end up on your defensive front. Granted, D Ford wasn't drafted there; he was drafted in Kansas City. But this defense in general can do what you have to do. It's mandatory against any great passer, and that's what Spagnuolo did against the Patriots, and that's A and B gap pressure.
Yeah, and when you look at how you at least try to contain or slow down Kansas City a little bit, Sam, when you look at the secondary matchup against the wide receivers for the San Francisco 49ers or for the Kansas City Chiefs, what do you think is the big key takeaway there?
Well, obviously you have Mr. Sherman, who everyone's going to talk about, and you're going to try to hopefully take away the area that he's playing in. But if you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, they've got speed. I don't really trust the 49ers. If you have to ask for one weakness in that defense, it's definitely the secondary as opposed to the linebackers with Quan Alexander, Fred Warner, and, of course, that defensive front. So if Kansas City is going to pick on some unit there, it's going to be the secondary. You're probably going to try to go after the safeties and try to just run the safeties, just run right by them because you got the speed just to do it. You try to duke the cornerbacks short and try to get the safeties deep because you can play those guys. You can play against them. The issue is you won't have the time necessarily to do that because you said the defensive front's so strong. If you are Kansas City, though, your offense has to absolutely take advantage of the matchups versus the cornerbacks, though, because that's where the area where you really have the advantage going into this game.
All right, so Anthony, what do you think is the Chiefs' big advantage here against the Niners' defense?
I think the Kansas City advantage here, and I'm not going to take credit for this because I haven't heard anybody say this in the past 2 weeks until today. And Marshall Faulk, I heard him say it on another radio program. Everybody's talking about the Chiefs haven't faced a defense like the 49ers. Well, the 49ers haven't faced weapons like Kansas City is going to present who can get down the field at a fast rate as they can. And I think that's going to be the advantage for Kansas City, as kind of Sam pointed to.
Yeah, but they only have one way to do that, and it's throwing the ball. And the thing that stands out to me here, I think, and I know people will tell me I'm crazy, but I think the 49ers offense is better than Kansas City's. When you look at this, they can run the ball. They go with the outside zone read blocking scheme, Randy. And when you watch that, it really opens up a lot of play action, especially crossers coming across there when you're getting the linebackers to move. And Shanahan's offense this year, believe it or not, has a league high 85 plays covering 20 yards or more, which is even more than the Chiefs.
Yeah, I think they use so much motion, so many different personnel groupings. I think they have the ability to give you looks that you don't, and no matter what they're doing defensively this week or last week or whenever, they're going to see a good bit of stuff they haven't seen before. And how you adjust to that and how you still maintain your responsibilities, I think that applies both sides because both these teams are going to stretch the defenses down the field. They both have the ability to do that. I mean, no one better than Tyreek Hill, but I think San Francisco's motion and their formations and everything they do is a completely different kind of a package than Kansas City. There's nobody else in the AFC that's anything like the San Francisco team. Probably the closest thing that they might have seen would be like a Baltimore, because another team that if you don't stop their run, they're just not going to pass. And in today's football, that's just incredibly unusual because everybody wants to pass because that's how you get paid.
Yeah. And, Anthony, when I look at it, the lack of a running game for Kansas City, I still think is going to be the death knell for them in this game.
Yeah, and they've struggled. Damian Williams, he has scored a lot in 4 playoff games in the past 2 seasons. But last year, he was, giving you these 80, 100-yard games. And the 2 games this year, I don't think he's gotten more than 48 yards on the ground. I think he could score, but if he doesn't get going on the ground, they are going to have a tough time. What Damian Williams does do really well is catch the ball out of the backfield, which could give San Francisco a matchup problem.
Yeah, and I think this also, if San Francisco can get pressure on Mahomes, the one weakness I've seen over the last couple of years, and it's a small weakness from Patrick Mahomes, Randy, is the
Mhm.
fact that I think he's a little inaccurate when he throws the hot routes. And we saw that, I thought, in the first quarter against Tennessee.
Well, he throwing it quick like that is not his forte. Him moving a little bit and stressing you that way is how they get a lot of their big plays. But when you think about defending this offense, if you don't defend from the back forward, you're out of your minds. I have a world of faith and a world of confidence that Kelsey's can do some really good things against the Niners D. Given enough time to run around. But it's going to be Watkins and Hill. If they're huge contributors, if they get some big plays, that's going to make this offense really, really hard to deal with. And that's, obviously pass rush is king. But if you saw the last couple of playoff games for San Francisco, they faced quarterbacks that can scoot around pretty good. And both those guys were able to create some time and create some space. And the difference is Mahomes and those receivers find a way to make huge plays when he starts moving around. So if he starts moving around, you better get on him or he's going to hit you for about 50.
Yeah, no doubt about that. You have to keep him in the pocket, and I think that's what we saw the Patriots do the first half of last year's AFC Championship game, which basically shut the Chiefs out. But of course, then Mahomes figured it out.
Yeah, he really, really did. I'm looking forward to this matchup just in general, and I'll emphasize the Niner defense again because they're averaging less than 300 yards a game given up, where Kansas City's given up over 400 yards a game. And it's not that the Niners haven't seen some pretty impressive offenses through the course of their schedule. They've seen some high-scoring, big-yard kind of offenses. One of them they lost to in Atlanta, who really had a good day out at Levi Stadium. But, Seattle and Green Bay and Baltimore and New Orleans. And so fast receivers and really good quarterbacks is not a new thing. I just, I think the defense and what it can do is something that's going to be a differentiator. I think that's going to be a good 13-point difference between the two teams.
All right, so Sam, when you look at the coaching here, who do you give the advantage to? Because Andy Reid's the experienced guy. Kyle Shanahan's done some great things, but they both in their biggest situations have had some issues. Whether it was Shanahan and not, at least running a play clock down in the Super Bowl a couple years ago, and of course Reid hasn't successfully completed by winning a Super Bowl yet.
Yeah, that's kind of a difficult question to answer because, like you said, they both struggled in the past. And in some sense, I'm not entirely secure about which guy will come out on top. They both might have issues during this game where they kind of lose track of what they're talking about. I think Randy alluded to this a little bit earlier. You have to be patient. You have to be calm in this kind of situation. And we've seen these guys make mistakes in big games before. So it will come down to who in that third quarter, fourth quarter, who's the guy who still has that poise, who still wants to be sticking to their game plan and isn't tearing everything up to try to do something different. Because remember, we saw Tennessee kind of do that against Kansas City in the AFC Championship game. They got away from the run game in the second half because they were worried about falling behind. In this game, you have to stick to your principles as a coach. You have to stick to what you plan to do, but also at the same point willing to work in some new aspects throughout the game. I don't know who's going to be the one who falls apart. One of these guys I feel like is going to struggle at the very end. I would give the advantage to Kyle Shanahan at this point because I think his offense and his team and the defense as well is just built to be more consistent, while the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes are more reliant on the big play. So I feel like the advantage would go to Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers in that case.
Yeah, and the one big thing that stands out to me about Patrick Mahomes is I can't remember in 2 years where he's really played a bad football game, Anthony.
No, and he doesn't make a lot of mistakes either. But that, going back to the whole coaching advantage, I think the advantage goes to whatever team starts fast. And in the first two playoff games for both of these teams, we've seen two very different stories to where Kansas City, they spotted 10 points to Tennessee, 24 to Houston, and they had to climb their way out of a hole where the 49ers scored first. And in the first quarter of both of their postseason wins, Kansas City cannot get into a hole in this game, at least not a 14, 17-point hole, and climb their way out. I think this San Francisco defense is just too talented.
But yet you're going to pick the Chiefs, aren't you, Anthony? All right. I think another thing.
It's all about, for me, I just want to see Andy Reid do it. That's what it's about for me. I think I'm a big Andy Reid guy. He's one win away from achieving the NFL head coaching triple crown, where he would join Weeb Eubank and Bill Parcells, and I'm drawing a blank on who the other one is. And really, I believe he has a Hall of Fame resume already, but this would put him over the top. I really want to see Andy Reid do it.
All right. Randy, what's your take on the coaching situation?
Andy Reid, probably of the two, as weird as it sounds, as much experience as he has, maybe has the most to prove in this whole deal. I'm real hesitant to crown real young people at what they do, only because, Kyle, everyone kind of assumes he may be back there, half a dozen times through the course of the rest of his career. Well, the reality is he may never even see this game again.
Yeah. That's Dan Marino, right, Randy?
Exactly. I don't put that 28-3 Super Bowl experience so much as a pay forward thing that's got to still be bothering Kyle. I know it bothers the hell out of the Falcons because it's still holding them down.
Yeah.
But he's done some pretty sharp stuff since then. I think Andy Reid is, I guess it's the personal tragedy. It's the death of his son and whatnot. And through the course of him always kind of being the open, gregarious kind of guy that he is, that people just naturally root for him. Coaching-wise, I see absolutely zero advantage in this game. I think if there's one coordinator that potentially could be a difference maker, it'd be Spagnuolo. And a guy that's been in a Super Bowl, a guy that's affected a really good offense in the past and done it on the biggest of stages. If anybody has the ability to pull something out of their hat, I would go with the guy that's been there and done it before like him.
All right, let me ask you this. When we look at the 49ers, the way they block, the way they play offense, if you're Spagnuolo, I would think it's safe to say if you watch how the Chiefs have played this season, playing that way is going to get them gashed, I think, by San Francisco's running game. How do you go about attacking this San Francisco offense?
Yeah, well, again, I'd say poise and patience, because when they start coming at you with the formations and then they add the motion and then you're looking at who it is that's in front of you, so the personnel groupings they do it with, as this game goes along, try to imagine yourself as a safety or a middle linebacker in the middle of that defense watching that offense, and tell me there's not some hesitation naturally just built into your brain when you see all that stuff going on in front of you. You just it's human nature. You don't react fast enough if you obsess with it. And that to me is part of that poise and that patience, because they're going to do it. They're going to have a lot of crazy stuff. They're going to have some big runs. But, I just think you're just going to have to be in a situation where, you're kind of taking deep breaths the whole time, especially if you're on either one of these defenses.
Yeah, and I would think the big key here are the linebackers for the Chiefs, because you'll have the outside zone look like it's going left, and the next thing you know, you got play action, and you got George Kittle running across the back of your formation, or they run that counter play where they're coming back the exact opposite place or up the middle, and they give you so many looks. It's similar to, I know Randy's old enough to remember this, but it's similar to like trying to defend the old wing T, only even more complicated.
Yeah. Well, you know what it really is? It reminds me of some of the stuff that Shanahan does. It's a lot like what Joe Gibbs tortured defenses with for a long time back in the 80s. He ran probably maybe let's be nice and say a dozen plays off, run wise, but he did it, out of dozens and dozens of formations, and he used different motions and he used different personnel groups. So it all looked completely different. And that's what that's all about. It's all about, I either want to stretch you out and get you hit inside, or I want to get the edge. How do I do that? I make you hesitate. And that's how both those coaches have done that.
Yeah. And Sam, when you look at it, is this something where you think that maybe Tyrann Mathieu ends up in the box to try to stop the run?
Yeah, if you talked about this the other day, if San Francisco comes out and starts hitting you with the run, you're gonna have to be, if you're Kansas City, you're probably gonna have to bring down Tyrann Mathieu, because he's a guy who's not afraid to get in there and make hits. We've talked about he has a nose for the football. He's not necessarily a very big safety, but he's a guy who doesn't mind getting involved and taking the hits in there. So you can bring down Tyrann Mathieu from a strong safety position, put him in the box. But then, of course, that opens up the play action, and then you just go over the top. So the other safety back there is Daniel Sorensen, because their Juan Thornhill's out on IR. So you got Sorensen, who's more of a heavy hitting safety. He's not really as good in coverage as someone like Mathieu. And you leave Sorensen back there, now you're open for a big play over the top.
Yeah, and I think that is the one big thing everybody misses when it comes to injuries here, Randy, is the difference between Sorensen and Thornhill. And I think that Thornhill would be more conducive to being able to keep this offense contained better than Sorensen.
Yeah, the Niners are a different offensive receiver group to deal with, only because if you love tape and you love tendencies and you want to study techniques and all that, good luck with this group, because most of them, besides Kittle, have been in and out of the lineup all year long. They're reps. So they're not only kind of healed and recovered, their reps for you to study aren't real high. And I think that's something that also, when you're talking about game planning and affecting people, and taking those shots down the field, that's going to be huge, because tendencies and whatnot are going to be tough to come by when you look at them on the offensive side of the ball.
All right, so Randy, what's your take on, or not Randy, but Anthony? I forgot about Anthony. But what's your take on the 49ers or the Chiefs defense defending the 49ers?
I think we're going to have to see, and you brought it up before, the versatility of Tyrann Mathieu. This is a player who's lined up at safety, slot corner, outside linebacker, inside linebacker, and a perimeter. He's going to have to be all over the field. We saw that a ton in the past two playoff games. And Tyrann Mathieu, he's going to have to be the difference maker, and he's going to have to disrupt what the 49ers are trying to do on offense. If this game ends up being a shootout, and the Vegas over-under on Jimmy Garoppolo dropbacks is 29.5, if Jimmy Garoppolo is throwing that much, I don't see a favorable outcome for San Francisco. And if he's throwing that much, I think Tyrann Mathieu is going to end up making a momentum-changing interception at some point. He is the key to this defense.
So you don't think that if Garoppolo has to throw the ball, that they can win the game?
I don't believe so, no.
See, I believe this, and I'm going to ask Sam and Randy the same thing. I think Jimmy Garoppolo is good enough to win a game throwing the ball, and I think we saw that in New Orleans earlier in the year against a better defense than what the Chiefs have.
Yeah,
Randy?
you've talked about this a couple of times.
Sam. Go ahead, Sam, then we'll go to Randy.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. But no, we've talked about this a couple of times where there have been games in the past this season where he's come out and he's had to throw the ball, and they had win against, I know it's kind of iffy because Arizona back in week 11, he threw for 424 yards and 4 touchdowns. They beat Arizona. And then you talk about New Orleans, which is the big one, where he threw for 349 yards and 4 touchdowns, throwing the ball 35 times. And he completed almost 75% of his pass attempts. So I do think you can win a game with Jimmy Garoppolo. I think we've talked about him being underrated in the past. And the question is, with him, he's a little bit of a hit or miss guy for me. So there are weeks where he's not the same guy. And then there are weeks where he comes out and he does look like that kind of guy who can get the game done, who can get the win for you. So it's just really, for me, I don't really know what he's going to be like until I see him. But there's definitely the possibility that he can go out there, throw the ball 30 times, and win the game.
All right, Randy?
Yeah, the analogy I would make, and obviously I'm not trying to draw any comparisons career-wise between these two, but if you think back to the old Dallas teams with the triplets, that's the kind of game plan that San Francisco wins with, and that's the kind of game plan that if I'm Kansas City, I'm trying to dissuade them from running, because I want my quarterback to probably throw somewhere in the 20 to 25 range passes wise, but I'm going to run it about 40 times. So, that's the key to me. If they can do that, and Garoppolo has more than proven against Green Bay, against New Orleans, against Baltimore, against the Rams, against the Seahawks, that when they have to throw, thank you. He'll take all the chances that you give him, and he can throw the ball. It's just people confuse having to with wanting to. And if you don't force them to, they shan't.
Well, I'll tell you this. I compare it to this. If you remember Bob Greasy in the early 70s, I mean, he was throwing 7 passes to win a Super Bowl. If you look at him in 1978 or 79, he got the Dolphins to the playoffs, and he was throwing the ball 35 times a game.
Yeah. I mean, and even you look at a guy, you look at Troy, plenty of examples in his career where teams just said, the heck with it, you aren't beating us with Emmett. And he had to throw it. And there's a reason why, Michael and Novacek and the rest of them, and Daryl Johnston, the way he could play fullback, did what they did was because when he really had to, he could do it. And that's something that, at least initially, you have seen from Garoppolo. I don't know if everyone pays attention to that, but I think the playoff stats have caused a lot of people to look at that and say, well, he just can't throw.
All right. Anthony?
I think my big question with Garoppolo is, can he do it if the 49ers can't get the rushing game going? Because in the 4 games that Garoppolo has thrown for at least 300 this year, the 49ers have rushed for at least 100 as a team in 3 of those contests, 2 of which they've rushed for $169 as a team. The only game which he threw for 300, which was that 408-yard performance against Arizona, and San Francisco did not rush for 100. They only rushed for 34 that game. It was in that win over a really terrible Arizona defense. And you bring up that Saints game, the 49ers as a team rushed for 162 yards that day. So if somehow the Kansas City Chiefs are able to contain this rushing attack, and that's a tall task because they averaged $144 as a team on the ground. If they can hold them to under 100, then can Jimmy Garoppolo do what he needs to do?
Well, I think this also. The big question is, once again, that this entire game to me isn't anything but Kansas City's defense. And the one stat that I found a couple days ago that I found really interesting was that 78% of the time, the 49ers use motion when they run the ball. The team that was like the second worst in the NFL of defending motion plays where the ball was run were the Kansas City Chiefs, and they were giving up almost 6 yards per carry against that. That's a good stat, isn't it, Randy?
Yeah, it's a real good one. I like that. I mean, I've got all kinds of stats, but unfortunately for both these teams, rarely do they apply. That one I like because it does apply.
Yeah, that's why it stood out to me too, Sam, and I think that it could be telling here.
Yeah, as we talked about this the last couple of days about the Chiefs' defensive front, and we've mentioned that the guys they have there are mostly Chris Jones and Frank Clark. The impact guys they have up there are mostly pass rushing guys and not really so much oriented towards stopping the run. When we talk about what happens if they over pursue, then you open up the passing lane and stuff like that, and you got guys sucked in, and it opens up for big plays. So we've talked about this, and the Chiefs have to change something up. They cannot play defense the way they've been playing defense and expect to be able to contain what the 49ers are going to do offensively. Because it's just right now with their personnel, between the personnel and their style play on defense right now, I just don't see what the Chiefs are going to do that could possibly eliminate the run game from the 49ers. Because the 49ers have been so good at that. And we've talked about their scheme on offense. The 49ers have such a great offensive scheme that allows them to do that, and they can throw the ball, and they have the talent there to do it. So I don't see what the Chiefs are going to be able to do to stop that.
Anthony?
I think this is a question for more to you and Mike, you and Randy. The Chiefs were able to contain Derrick Henry last week. What is the difference between what the Titans do running the football and what the 49ers do? Like, how are the Chiefs able to stop Henry, who was coming into that game racking off 3 straight games with $180 on the ground? So what is the difference between how Kyle Shanahan employs his rushing attack versus what the Tennessee Titans do?
You want me or Randy?
Well,
go ahead, Randy.
Both. You're both
Tennessee,
the football guys.
Tennessee does a lot more in the way of man blocking.
Yeah.
I think Tennessee also, because of the nature of a guy that's 6'4", 245, obviously more of a power running team. San Francisco's got 3 different running backs they're going to throw at you. Maybe 2, depending on what Coleman's shoulder is like. But I think their offensive line as a group is better suited to what they do against a defense like Kansas City than Tennessee was, because Tennessee was really kind of a one-trick pony. Because if Derrick Henry wasn't going to beat you, then the rest of it really wasn't going to beat you. I think the biggest difference to me is in those offensive lines. The Niner offensive line is much more athletic and much more suited, and it's a bigger requirement for them. They've got to be able to deal on the run, deal on the move. And if you're going to disrupt that running game, that's how you do it. It's by shedding offensive linemen and by filling backside gaps and holes by getting off those blocks, because they stick on blocks much better, I would say, than Tennessee. Tennessee just smacks you in the Niners are a little bit different.
Yeah. How about this, Randy? I compare it to like the 78-79 Houston Oilers, where it was Earl Campbell. Dan Pastorini could throw the ball deep off play action, but he really only had one major threat catching the ball, which was Kenny Burrow. So it was really a limited team. And Earl Campbell's as great a running back as I've ever seen. I'm not old enough to have seen Jim Brown, but he was the same kind of guy as Derrick Henry, where he could just take the game over. The other thing, though, that stands out to me is not just the man blocking, but the Tennessee Titans are a team that will beat you off play action, but it's usually with the big play over the top. San Francisco, with the way they run the outside zone and the way they block it, they can beat you with play action short. They can beat you with it intermediate, and they can beat you with it deep. So if I'm a defensive coordinator, the last thing I want to see is an offense that can attack me on all 3 levels, if you know what I mean. They can attack me short, medium, and deep. Where I think with the Tennessee Titans, you see a team that basically they're either running the ball between the tackles at you, and let's face it, I don't think the Tennessee Titans offensive line, I think they're average. And when you got a guy like Chris Jones, even though he's mainly a pass rusher, he could stop that run because he's still 6'6", 290 pounds, but he's a better athlete than the guard that's in front of him or the tackle that's in front of him, so he can defeat him. With the 49ers, they're all zone blocking, which means they're coming down across his face. They're making it harder for him to just use his strength, because they're basically, if I'm zone blocking you, I'm using your strength against you.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And when Kansas City on the defensive side deals with them, their guys like Jones are going to be so critical, even more so than he was last week and 2 weeks ago. And he did a really good job against Tennessee, but he has got to be able to get up the field and penetrate and disrupt. If you can penetrate and disrupt against a zone blocking team, though it's kind of dangerous, but if you can get that penetration and disrupt their flow like that, that's how you stop them.
Yeah, and I really don't know that Chris Jones is built to be able to do that here. He might, but I just don't know, Anthony. But any other questions, Anthony? Because I'm plumb out of them.
No, not really.
You can tell I've been watching, the Andy Griffith Show again because I just said I was plumb out of questions, Randy.
I know one thing, though, guys. The Kansas City, the 49ers are very lucky they're not favored by about a touchdown, because in games, the Kansas City Chiefs aren't favored by a touchdown, because in games that they are, Patrick Mahomes is almost unbeatable. I think if they're favored by 6, he's like 33-2. It's crazy. I'm really surprised they're not favored by a little bit more, but this thing being sort of a coin toss doesn't favor any side. I'd be curious if any of you got any numbers from that standpoint, that anything that leaps off the page as far as what these teams have done.
Well, Anthony?
What? So what's the question?
Oh.
No, I'm just curious, with this such a small point spread, does that favor anybody from the past, or as far as in games like this, in games that Kansas City's only favored by 1 or 3 or less, what's their record? What's their performance in the past?
Come on,
I
Anthony.
don't know that.
I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm sure there's something out there.
I'll tell you what, I don't think there's been too many times they've only been favored by 1.5 in the last 2 years, Randy.
No, I know that.
And I could also tell you this. I think the 49ers, the way I usually look at a football game is this. Who's got the better O-line? Who's got the better D-line? And if one team has an advantage at both of those, I have a hard time believing they're going to lose the game.
Yeah. No, I think that's usually a pretty good yardstick, because that means you're going to be able to run the ball, protect the passer, and you're going to make life hell for the other guy.
Yeah.
But those guys out in the desert, they don't build everything with gold and marble and everything else because they like the style. They stay in the money, and they're not going to be too far off.
Yeah, but they're also, you got to realize this. I think it only being 1.5 means that actually Vegas may favor the Niners, because the cool pick are the Kansas City Chiefs. So in Vegas, they're trying to get even money, bet on this game so they can't lose no matter what.
Yeah, I guess so.
And I can tell you this,
so.
You guys were favored like 7.5 over the Bengals, and if Lewis Billups would have intercepted that damn pass.
That's the one thing that's consistent. When I talked to the Rams before the Super Bowl here in Atlanta during the ice storm, I was talking about doing ordinary things at extraordinary times. And it was funny because after the game, I talked to Mike Jones, and he looked at me and said, "You know what? This is exactly what you told us on Friday." And I started laughing. I said, "Yeah, that's what it is." Because people don't think about that, but Billups, how many interceptions did he catch in practice or in high school or in college? Yeah. And how many bounced off his hands?
But we all know this is because, God favored Joe Montana, which is why you guys won.
Well, God's a Niner fan, so.
If he was, why has it been so long since y'all won again?
So of course he liked Joe.
Did he just become a Niner fan in 1981?
I believe so. No, he wasn't a big fan of Keezer.
Nobody was a big fan of Keezer, were they?
Yeah. Even the Niners weren't a fan of Keezer back
All
then.
right, so let's go ahead. Who you picking in this game, Sam, and give me an MVP.
Yeah, I'm going to take the San Francisco 49ers, and I'm actually going to go with Deebo Samuel as the MVP, because I think he's that X factor potentially in that offense. We've talked about what Kansas City's defense can do or could not do. Depending on what Kansas City throws at San Francisco, I think Deebo Samuel could be the guy who cracks things open for the 49ers.
You got to give us a score, too, so we can have a tiebreaker for the $1 million Anthony's giving to whoever gets the closest.
I'll say score is going to be 42-33.
All right. Anthony?
I think the difference in this game, because I don't see either defense being able to stop either offense. I see somewhat of a 34-31 finish in favor of the Kansas City Chiefs. I think Patrick Mahomes is going to win the MVP, and he's going to have a huge game because the 49ers, they've struggled against mobile quarterbacks. Kyler Murray, Russell Wilson, Lamar Jackson had a combined 71 quarterback rating versus the 49ers, while everyone else finished with a combined 28 QBR. I think his mobility and ability to evade that rush is going to be the difference in this game.
I would like to bring up the fact that Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens only scored 20 points, and they kicked like an 800-yard field goal to win the game, right? And how many times did the Cardinals beat the 49ers? Did they beat them once?
No, but, the Cardinals did take them, a very poor Cardinals team almost pulled it off.
Yeah, but see, almost.
With a rookie quarterback.
Don't mean nothing. You know what? The Miami Dolphins, with a 75-year-old quarterback, beat the New England Patriots. Are you going to claim that the Dolphins are better? I just think this. In the NFL, you either win or you lose. And teams that go 4-12 predominantly will lose like 7 or 8 games by a touchdown or less. So I think this. Good teams win close games. Bad teams lose them. Randy?
Yeah. I mean, I could see this game being extremely close. I could see it being a field goal game. I think it's more points, so it's an over. For me, I think it's 37-24 San Francisco, and it gets within 13 because they score a late touchdown against San Francisco. But it's not a cruise for the Niners, but you can see it from there.
Yeah. All right, and I don't know. Have we seen the Chiefs get beat up or blown out by anybody, Anthony?
No, I since Mahomes been starter, I just don't think they have lost any by more than 7.
What about that Colts game? Wasn't that worse than 7, or did it just seem worse?
Earlier this year, that was 6.
6. All right. I'm gonna say 49ers 38, Chiefs 20. Just because Randy said nobody could blow them out. No, I really, when you look at this game, it's like I said, it's similar to Super Bowl 19 to me. And this also, Randy, for the Chiefs to win this game, Patrick Mahomes is pretty much going to have to put this team on his back and win the Super Bowl. How many times have we seen a quarterback do that when he didn't have the better defense or the better line?
Yeah, I think if that's the scenario, Kansas City's going to be in trouble. I think Williams and some running, regular passes to Kelsey, stuff underneath the Watkins, taking your shots with Hill. That's how Kansas City wins. If it becomes the Patrick Mahomes show, that's how you get him beat up, and B, that's how you lose.
Yeah, and I'll also say this: nerves has a lot to do with this because I've interviewed a lot of guys like Chris Collinsworth. Collinsworth told me, he said, when they introduced us for Super Bowl 16, he said I couldn't breathe for like 5 minutes, and he said it's kind of an overwhelming thing. And the thing about that is, I think you're less likely to have a mistake when you're the team that's starting out the game running the ball.
Yeah, Collinsworth is just afraid Lott was going to break him in half.
Well, Collinsworth was afraid anybody could break Chris in half. He weighed like 180 pounds.
Somehow we're back to the Bengals again.
Well, it gets to me, Randy, because Collinsworth.
Enjoy Joe Burrow, okay?
Other people, but Collinsworth fumbled the ball at the 5-yard line. We fumbled two kicks along the ground in the last minute of the first half of Super Bowl 16. We get stopped 4th and goal at the 1. I don't know, Randy. It's never going to get any better for me.
Yeah, and if Stanley Wilson had just made it one more night.
Actually, I think you guys had a huge advantage because there was no Stanley Wilson, because yourself, that field in Super Bowl 23 was about like a junior high or peewee field that wasn't well taken care of.
Yeah, no, that's the first thing that came to mind earlier. I saw George Toma. Somebody did a feature, and they showed, there's the 90-year-old field specialist from Kansas City, George Toma. And I was like, it's bad, but all I remember is that, somebody leaving that pump on overnight, and that field was in horrendous shape for that game. You're right.
Oh, yeah, I remember when you'd cut, there'd be like chunks of turf just fly up. And I think it had a lot to do with the Wallace and Crumry injuries.
Oh, I know it did for both. It absolutely did.
Yeah, and a lot of people forget Steve Wallace was a huge part of you guys' offense, too, and he went down, like the second play of the game?
Yeah. Went down. If you thought you should have heard me.
But, all right. So it looks like three of us will be right. Anthony will be wrong, but it'll be just like the season when. Did you know, Randy, that Anthony came up with a nickname for Dak Prescott at week 4 or 5? Do you want to tell everybody what your Cowboy favorite player's nickname was supposed to be?
Intangidak.
Intangidak?
Intangidak. Intangibles and Dak just fit.
Okay. So I'm guessing there wasn't a long line on trademarking that one.
Hey, I was ready to make a T-shirt if they went on a run.
Oh, and you know what? If they start out next year 1-0, he'll be ready to make the T-shirt again, Randy, because he's a Cowboys fan.
I love it. That's a great thing about fandom. There's always next year.
See, I'm a Bengals fan. I don't believe that way, Randy.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. There's always next decade.
Yeah, at least I'm not a Browns fan no, I don't even think there's next decade. I think I'm doomed to never see my team win the Super Bowl. And it's partially your fault, Randy. So there is a little ill will here now.
Well, I tell you what. Yeah, they're with that. If he's as good a quarterback as I think he is, that might be a pretty good ticket to getting a chance to get close.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just still not going to hold out any hope because I'm still pretty sure right the last second he's going to say, "I'm not going to be a Bengal." Because I'll tell you what, I've been a Bengal fan my whole life. My son's a Bengal fan, and he's a quarterback. And if the Bengals were getting ready to draft him with the first pick, I may just say we would choose to go elsewhere. I still feel bad about, him growing up as a Bengals fan because I think I've doomed him to a lifetime of misery. But also, I want to remind everybody you can hear the Randy Cross podcast on thegruelingtruth.com. We're getting ready to post that later today. Randy, you want to tell everybody a little bit about it?
Yeah, it's just this is a good one. It's got a couple of cool stories. We deal with Kobe too, and what happened with him, and we look forward to this big game, which, as we all know, we have to refer to as the big game because the NFL has got really good attorneys, and we've been working on this the one for next week ever since we got done with this one. So looking forward to it.
Do we have a preview for next week? What it could be?
Well, I got a funny feeling it's got something to do with the 49ers' 6th Lombardi trophy.
Yeah, you had to rub that in. Too bad it wasn't their 5th, though. Then we could both be happy, Randy. Wouldn't that be nicer? You played in San Francisco. They're liberal. Maybe you guys should have just gave us one.
Yeah. They got a lot of stuff on it. They got a lot of stuff out there you can have right now.
All right, Sam, tell everybody where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Sam_Teets33. That's TEETS. I post plenty of articles and stats there. Feel free to go check that out. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram.
All right, Anthony, tell everybody where they can hear the FF Face-Off.
Yeah, absolutely. You can follow me on Twitter at The Real NFL Guru, and you can follow my show at The FF Face-Off, and we can be found at all of the top social media and podcast platforms.
All right, guys, and we'll be back Monday at 1 o'clock. Make sure you listen in then. You can hear us any place you find podcasts, including iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify. But for now, for Sam Teets, Randy Cross, Anthony Cervino, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.